Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today I will proceed with my lectures on BQS554. So the topic today would be telecommunication system. This lecture will be for students of Part 4, namely Part 4 A, B and C, where their classes are with me. Okay, so please don't forget to write your name and student number at the comments, and also please comment on the video itself. Any improvements that I could make to for the betterment of your online learning experience. So today I've prepared a couple of materials for you. Okay, so let's get started. Check things for a bit. Okay, so just to make sure that you can hear me. So telecommunication system, previously we already talked about fire, we talked about electricity, and this is the third topic on telecommunication system. Okay, communications. So basically communication consists of a message, whether it is data or information, that is communicated through a signal. Okay, the transmission medium carries the signal. So there are some requirements here. First of all, if you look at the diagram there need to be a sender, and there's also need to be a receiver. So the sender will send a message, okay, whether one type of data or information, what is known as the signal. So this signal shall be sent to the receiver through a transmission medium. So there needs to be a transmission medium to ensure that the signal can be sent from the sender to the receiver. So the electronic transmission of signals for communication. So this is a bit more advanced than that. So we can also say telecommunication in terms of modern telecommunications, basically an electronic transmission of signals for communication. Okay, including such means as telephone, radio and television. Okay, so all these means have fulfilled the definition of communication. We have sender, we have a receiver, and we have the signal, and also we have the medium where the signal is traveling on. Okay, where the telecommunication medium is anything that carries an electronic signal and interfaces between the sending device and the receiving device. So the medium itself must be able to carry that signal, okay, and interact or interface with those devices. So in modern telecommunications, there are a number of systems. We have telephones, the common landlines, Internal communication telephones. These are internal telephones usually being used by large organizations in offices and things like that. Paging and alarm system. You usually can find this in shopping malls and things like that. Okay, they are paging for people. Radio. Okay, where the radio communications and other equipments. So we will be focusing more on telephone. Okay, so Telekom Malaysia TM, so it provides telephone services in Malaysia. The cable infrastructure for the telephone services has been installed by TM. So the basic facilities for telecommunication system have been installed by TM. These days, private companies also have installed these facilities for telephone or telecommunication services. So it consists of telephone lines, the main telephone exchanger, distribution frames and telephone cabinets, distribution points and manhole. Also, these are some of the components of the system. So in terms of telephone lines, okay, so this refers to the physical wire or other signaling medium connecting the user's telephone apparatus to the telecommunications network. So those poles that carries the wire of the telephone, okay, so these are known as the telephone lines. Although we these days we are not using timber poles, okay. They use these concrete poles, which is a lot more sturdy and lasts longer. So this telephone line, these days they don't just carry for cables for telephone purposes, but rather they would carry cables for more advanced telecommunication features such as internet services. So these days when you apply for a telephone line, they may come with internet services, so they will come through the line together. Okay, and then we have the main telephone exchange. Okay, so you can see here these are the customer, and then we have the telephone lines and the cabinets. This is the switching, okay, what they call as the main telephone exchange. So it functions to serve the telephone network of a particular area, okay, where it is the main control center. It also supplies electricity to the telephone line. Okay, so the telephone line also carries a small quantity of electricity in order for it to carry the signal. So this electricity is supplied by the main telephone exchange, the exchange. So equipped with MDF, okay, processes telephone calls, changes sound waves and vice versa, connects telephone lines from users of different areas of telephone exchange to another. So the MDF serves the request of the customers, okay, to connect their calls from one area to the other. In those days, they would have to do it manually. These days is automatic. Yeah. And then distribution frames and telephone cabinets. Okay, so you can find this kind of units, okay, at the side of the road. Yeah. So this for domestic users, cable are bought into cabinets. Same concept with MDF, but cater certain area. Example Bandayu. So we have a number of these cabinets. So this is a smaller size MDF to serve the request of customers of that particular small area. Okay. So these days we use it. We can see it's in cabinet form, but in those days is cylindrical shape, like a rocket. Back when I was a kid, we always play around those cylinder shape distribution frames. But these days it's more like a cabinet. Yeah. Distribution points or overhead pole. Okay, so from the cabinets, cables are brought up to the telephone poles 35 meter maximum distance apart. So this is the distribution points or the overhead pole. So they would have a lot of wires, primary, secondary, service, drop and full. But these days, since we are using concrete poles, we don't see a lot of wires, okay, coming through the telephone pole. Okay, sometimes it's just one cable. Manhole, local network start and underground cable to be connected to user. So if the area does not use an overhead pole to basically carry the cable one place to the other, then they will use a manhole system. So distance from one manhole and another is 180 meters, which is longer than the overhead poles. So normally a precast manhole and as a passage for cables to be connected to the cabinets. Okay. Okay, so let's see on the telephone number. So every telephone services would require certain numbers. So these numbers have certain meanings to them. Okay, like this number, for example, 60. So those who are making calls within Malaysia does not have to dial in the 60 number. This is for national code main exchange when you are making calls overseas. Okay, then you need to key in those numbers, especially not from Malaysia making overseas call, but from those overseas who are trying to reach Malaysia, then they need to key in the 60 number. Okay, and then the 03 is the state code. So this is the main exchange number. I believe 03 is for Selangor. Okay, so if you want to call Selangor, you have to dial 03. Opera, I believe, is 05. Okay, and then 7766, this is the main branch exchange, the district code. Okay, so from that number we know the call is going to which district, and even over here we have the terminal code. So which telephone cabinet and telephone set it is actually receiving the call. So we even know which telephone set is receiving that call, because each telephone set would usually have different numbers. So the telephone number is somewhat like an address. okay, for that particular call. Okay, services to serve into building categories. Okay, so the telephone system category 1. Okay, for category 1, the type of building that is for category 1 is more than 5 stories high. Then the owner would have to request for category 1 a telephone system from Telecommunication. Next is the size of incoming cable. Cable with more than 50 lines. So there's a lot more customers to be served, okay, with this cable. But these days, I'm not sure the people are transferring into fiber optics. Okay, so back in those days when they were using copper lines, so each copper cable would serve one call. So if you have like 50 lines, then you would have like 50 cable inside one large cable. 50 lines inside one cable, it will be very large. So that's why with modern technology, we change to the use of fiber optics. Okay, so even with high traffic, okay, we just need lesser lines or lesser connection using fiber optics compared to using the copper cables. Okay, so even these days when we apply for installation of Unify and whatnot, we can see that they are using fiber optic cables. Okay, so for back to category 1, the floor area is less than 7,000 square feet. Okay, so next is category 2, type of building 5-story and below. Okay, so cable with less than 50 lines and less 7,000 square feet of floor area. Category 3, this is the smallest category in the phone system. It's for residential, bungalow and terrace house. Size of incoming cable, very few lines. Sometimes it's just one line. Okay, and floor area, no limit. Okay, so category 1 buildings more than 5 stories. So this is probably for tall and high-rise buildings. So for this category, large buildings, at the point just before the buried telephone cable enters the building, a jointing chamber will be built. So this is where the cable from outside the building gets into the building. So we need to have a jointing chamber. So this jointing chamber can either be a manhole for cable more than 400 lines or a joint box for cable with less than 400 lines. So previously I conducted a visit to TM Tower, and Alhamdulillah we got good cooperation. They even show us all their cabinets and equipments, and we have the opportunity of seeing the jointing chamber of the TM Tower, and believe me, it's huge and it's very deep. Okay, you can see the manhole there is, a lot of cables inside there. Okay, so that is for like high-rise building, which obviously would serve more than 400 customers. But for a smaller buildings of 5 stories and higher, then they can use just a joint box, which is usually outside. It's not underground, it's above ground and outside the building. Okay. So it is used to help the linking of the cable from the building to the TM underground cable. So they would have like a main underground cable, so to connect the service to the building. So we need to have this jointing chamber. So for category 2 building, okay, 5-story and below. So the kind of buildings we are talking about here, terrace shop houses. Okay, so terrace shop houses usually 2 or 3 stories high. Okay, the cables are run underground from the main underground TM cable at the manhole or the joint box to a adjoining pit just outside the building. So if this is the area uses underground cabling, okay, or even overhead cable, also not a problem. Okay, those main cable will just connect to a manhole or the joint box outside the building. So again, this is the connection for the building to the main telephone cable outside. Yeah. So from the joining pit, the cables are run to a second jointing pit just inside the building. So they will connect to the inside of the building, and then from there the cable emerges to the distribution point box at one end of the building. So this is where the line that's coming in will be distributed or will branch out into the areas inside the building. So this is called as the distribution point. So the cable is then laid through the length of the outside wall of the building, and then we will have junction box installed when a line is to run into a premise. Okay, and then category 3 buildings, residential bungalow and terrace houses. So these are customers which have a very low requirement or demand on the telephone system. Okay, we are talking about domestic houses. Okay, so they would receive through overhead or underground. Okay, doesn't matter. It's just that underground is not visible, so doesn't clutter up there. So this is depends on the developer of that housing area. So if they design the housing estate as to have underground cabling, and then they will use manholes. Otherwise, they would, put the cables on those telephone poles. Usually, the developer trying to cut costs, they would always opt for the use of telephone poles. Even the developers doesn't install those telephone poles. It's TM has to come in and install that telephone poles. So underground cabling advantage is not visible, does not clutter up the area, but the disadvantages: possibility of being brought down and snapping by roadside tree branches. This is what from the possibility. So again, the advantage of underground cabling. If you have a tree coming down and whatnot, it will not hit the cable on the pole because all the cables are underground. Okay, a little bit of a diagram between a comparison between overhead and underground telephone cable. You can see this is the overhead cable diagram. So you have the cable coming in, and then you have the wall hook. From there, you would have the lead-in box, and then we have the junction box if we have more than one telephone connection. Okay, so in this house they have two. Okay, so maybe each one would have their own numbers. Okay, so they will have this junction box. If you only have one telephone, and then you might not need this junction box. Okay. For underground cable, it comes in through underground, and then they would have to make openings for the underground cable to come in. So here they have a 19 mm ball band. Okay, so it comes in, gets into the house, and then same, we have the lead-in box. Okay, so lead-in box, and then they would connect to the telephone. Okay. Okay, a little bit of photos here. You can see that the cable is coming into the building through the underground access. So all these cables are going into the high-rise building, okay, at the top. So these are obviously underground cables. So which means that we have a very high demand building using this telecommunication service. So the premise distribution system. So this is the distribution system, the telecommunication distribution system within the building itself. Okay. So previously we are talking about distribution system outside the building. So this is inside. So when we talk about inside of the building, most likely this is the responsibility of the owner. Okay. So telephone system within a building, i.e. building telephone wiring system. Okay. So a large building category 1 and 2, okay, yang system, the previous system, premises distribution system may consist of, so we are talking about category 1 and 2. Main telephone equipment, riser, floor or zone telephone equipment system, and internal telephone switching system. So in the category building are required to have the telephone equipment room. So for category 1, okay, this, okay, category 1 customers, they would have to have their own telephone equipment room. Category 2, they do not need to have telephone equipment room, because they sometimes do not have the MDF lah, main distribution frame. Okay. So the main telephone equipment room, they left out the room. The main entry cable from the street leads to a distribution frame at the basement level. Okay. Then it interconnects with the controlling switchboard, which is located inside that room. Okay, so some other things inside the room. We have the MDF, Premise Telephone Exchange System, PABX, okay, TS. So this is the exchange system that will serve the requests of the people inside the building. Okay. Backup battery system, okay, this is needed to ensure that the system still function when there is no electricity being supplied to the system. So the backup battery system will kick in. And then we have the distribution cable snaking towards, inside the building. Technician workroom, storage room, and fire extinguisher system, also very important in the main telephone equipment room. Okay, so this is a photo of the MDF. Okay, it's basically just a frame used for distributing telephone cable into several lines for multi-subscriber within one or more line in a single building. So from one huge cable, they will split it up and it will end up here at the MDF. So lines from incoming cable are connected to the line of the internal telephone wire on the terminal blocks. So the terminal block are fixed onto the frame. So this frame is actually a MDF. So they use this frame so that it will be easy for them to have access to the cables and whatnot and to make maintenance. Okay. So in terms of operation, cables are connected from the main telephone line exchange to the MDF. Okay. So the MDF consists of distribution side and exchange side, so which are located on the metal frame itself. So it has two sides. So cable come in from user area A distribution side and connected to the user area B exchange side. So they have this incoming and outgoing. So the distribution side is connected to the exchange side by the jumper wire. Okay, earth wire is normally located behind the D side, with distribution side will carry excess electricity charges to the earth. Okay. And then we have the PABX, private automatic branch exchange. So it's a local private switching system located at the customer premises. Okay, so it's exchange of calls made automatically. So it switches calls within the building or between the outside telephone network and the PABX. So it will serve the request of the customer, whether the customer wants to talk to people within the building or wants to talk with people outside the building. So that depends on the telephone number that the customer had dialed. After the MDF, the lines are connected to the premises. Okay, in each premise, the lines are connected to the PABX or KTS. Okay, so this is the flow of equipments. They will have the MDF, and then the line will continue, and then they will go to the PABX or KTS. Can go up to 10,000 extension. So in a very big building, they would have a lot of extension. So if the customer just want to make a call to people inside the building, they just need to dial the extension number. But if the customer needs to make outside call, then they would have to key in the entire set of numbers. Okay, so this is an image of the PABX. Okay, a lot of electrical equipments here, so that's why they need to have that firefighting system. Okay, and then the KTS is further down the line after the PABX. Sometimes if the building is not that large, they would not even have the PABX. They just go straight to the key telephone system, KTS. An arrangement of telephone equipment located on a premise where telephone has access to more than one trunk line from central office or PABX. Okay, they will have more than one line. Allows customers to access more than one outside or internal line, and the telephone set function including originating call, answering a call, putting call on hold, and intercom. So this KTS allows for more than one line being served at the same time. So this is when like you are having a conversation in a phone, and then a signal comes in indicating that there's another call coming in. So you can put someone that you were talking to on hold when you answer the incoming call. So this kind of capabilities are being served by the KTS. So suitable for office user where several phone sets sharing a few trunk lines. Okay. The backup battery here, having PAB and KTS in the backup battery system has to be fitted in case of blackout. Okay. And then we have the cabling itself. So distribution cables are taken from MDF or PABX at the lowest floor to other parts of the level of the building. So they are placed into a riser duct. So if you are talking about high-rise building, of course the cables would need to go through risers and such. We are talking about a particular level, then they would have a dedicated route for the distribution of the cables. And then this is the riser room. It's a vertical passage enclosed by concrete or brick wall that carry telephone cable to various floors. Sometimes it's not just we may have a dedicated riser for telephone services, but sometimes they even share, okay, with other services. And then the cable fitted into cable tray. Okay, and then we have a riser closet. Floor or zone telephone equipment system, and then so this is when the telephone system needs to go horizontally. It needs to be distributed horizontally. So we have horizontal ducts that laid cables in the floor form distribution box to either secondary boxes, junction boxes, terminal point, PABS or KTS. So these are the cabling for that particular level. We are not talking risers anymore. We're talking about horizontal distribution for the cables. Okay. So the junction boxes contain telephone outlet, okay, telephone socket or jack, the plug. So this is the last connector before it's being connected to the actual phone itself. So for example, hotel cater mini room, does it use the branching layout? So depending on the layout of the building, if you in a particular level have a lot of telephone, so they would have to use a certain layout. So telephone outlet are found at junction points which the plug of telephone set can be inserted. So the you click in your phone, so that is known as the basically junction box. Okay. So a cross section through rising duct. So cable hole, corridor floor, structure floor, ceiling finish, floor ducting section. Okay, so next let us continue with the duct layout. So this duct layout is for the placement of telephone cables horizontally inside the building itself, where those cables will be laid out on each of the floor. How it will be placed depends on the function of the floor itself. So we have the grid layout, branching layout, and the perimeter layout. So in the grid layout, we can see that the cabling and the junction boxes are being put in a grid manner. So this is suitable for open plan office floor where we have maybe a lot of cubicles in the floor. So on the floor itself, so all over the area of the floor we would place cubicles, so this would be suitable for that purpose. So the junction boxes are located in the floor where the telephone outlets can be found. So we have the junction box and the telephone outlets built into the floor. This can be accommodated when we are actually building the floor of the building itself. So we put in all the conduit junction boxes early during the construction, or we can have it built above the floor or built inside a raised floor. Okay. So the typical grid spacing is 3.6 by 3.6 meters. Again, depends on the requirement of the client. Okay. This is the most flexible layout of arrangement for shopping complex. Shopping complex, offices, things like that, where we need telephone connectivity all over the floor. So this would be a good layout for that purpose. Next, we would have the branching layout. So this is for open plan offices with permanent rooms. So the permanent rooms might be located here near the wall over here. So this might be the boss's room or something like that, or discussion rooms. And over here we also have the outlets. Okay. So the central feeder duct with junction boxes 8 on the floor at the corridor. Okay, we have the feeder ducting and junction boxes near the stairs over here. So this is suitable for hotel, apartment buildings, and even offices. Okay. Next, we have the perimeter layout. So the perimeter layout suitable for partition office with rooms along the wall. So we have a feeder duct located approximately 450 mm from the outside wall. So we have the feeder ducting here. So it's near the wall and has a short branch ducts to the junction boxes. Okay. Again, we have this connection all over the wall, so that's why it's called the perimeter wall. This might be suitable for very large offices or even factories. Okay, we would have rooms, office rooms at the sites. And then we have the switching system, internal telephone switching system. So these are being installed for all communication requirements, because we have a number of telephone inside the building. So all these phones needs to be connected to the main telephone line outside. So how do we decide which phone has the connectivity to the line and which phone does not? This is where we would have the PABX and KTS here. So the PABX is a private automatic branch exchange. Okay, depend on premise size and whether it's a single or multiple occupancy. So the PABX is a automatic switching system which will connect the phone calls between outside the building to inside of the building. So the PABX will do it automatically, where in the old days we would have our operators and it has to be, the telephone connection has to be connected manually. So these days we would do it automatically with the PABX. Design must be considered all the apparatus such as switchboard, battery, and other apparatus. So the PABX is not just one machine. We would have another support equipments for that purpose. Okay, so this is how the the call will come through, okay, from the outside of the building to inside. So we start at the main cable cabinet here. Okay, from there it travels into the building to the MDF. So from there, the call will continue to the PABX. Okay, and then from the PABX, the call will be specified for a designated telephone equipment. So let's say it's in on the second or third floor, whatever, and then the call will be sent up through a riser system, through a horizontal system, and then it will reach the telephone set where it needs to be. Okay, so quite a lot of tasks that needs to be done, but all of these are being done automatically. Okay, so for that, from there we have completed in terms of fixed line telecommunication. I hope that you would revise on this topic. Next, we will continue on wireless telecommunication system. Okay, so with that, I thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.